right, welcome back to another one of our interviews, talking with creators who have books upcoming from Titan Comics. With me is Norm Konyu, I hope again, and he has a book about Edgar Allan Poe, based on Edgar Allan Poe. Before we get talking about that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your experiences with comics growing up, and what made you want to get into this, get into the industry and make your own.
Right. Well, I grew up in Canada, and as a kid, I was kind of the garage sale comic book collector, finding comics that way. Conan was my thing back in the day, the John Buscema days. But just about anything I could pick up cheap in garage sales was kind of the way I kind of got introduced into comics. I played around with them in high school a bit, but then I went into animation eventually. So I worked for people like DreamWorks and the BBC, Cartoon Network, places like that. And I did do comics for decades, really. And it wasn't until less than 10 years ago, much less than 10 years ago, I guess I started trying again. And it was personally not for the fast cars and the money, that, believe it or not, but to do something that was entirely my own, because animation is a big group effort. You're a cog in a much larger machine. So it was just to do something that was all me, writing, art, whatever, for better or for worse.
So why don't you tell us the name, the title of the book, and kind of give us a overall, what it is about.
Okay. Well, I've got my self-published version here. I can hold up. Oh, it's going to be all backwards for you, isn't it? It's called Edgar Allan Poe. We've decided to add Poe in for the full version in case people weren't sure who Edgar Allan was. But it's Edgar Allan, A Tale of Mystery and Intervention, which is a play on probably his most famous collection of stories, Tales of Mystery and Imagination. And it's a bit of a humorous taster, really, of Poe's work and a bit about the man himself, to introduce people that don't know Poe and maybe look at Poe in a different way for people that do know him. What really spurred me on is I'd previously done a book similar to this about H.P. Lovecraft. And so Poe was my next step, and it was really spurred on because both my kids, one's in his 21 and the other, she's in her teens, didn't know who Edgar Allan Poe was, which I think is shocking that, in today's world, classics are sort of disappearing in a way. So that's what it, kind of became the core of it. Maybe I can get a few people interested in his work, pick this up, get a little introduction, and maybe then go on and actually read his source material.
So, what is the main story of the book? Who are the characters? And
yeah, it's got a very loose plot in that it's Edgar Allan Poe meets up with an old friend of his who's a theater producer in Massachusetts, and Poe is pitching him, believe it or not, a musical that he wants to do, and his old friend, who's obviously weathered Poe's life for many years, attempts to kind of pull him out of his depths of woe and murder and everything that encompasses a Poe story, and try to get him to experience something different than that. Probably to little avail, but that's it. It's just a loose plot line, kind of to link together all the Poe stories. So it's made up with double page spreads, and each spread is a different one of Poe's stories.
Cool. I mean, I love Edgar Allan Poe and his works. And I like, the Pit and the Pendulum is pretty is I don't want to say a fun story, but or the Fall of the House of Usher. I mean, I remember being introduced to Poe, probably more so in high school. But um, when did you first become introduced to Poe and his works?
Well, I was kind of that weird kid in high school that was, not even high school. I think I read a lot of Poe stuff in grade school, and so I did that. But I was also kind of spurred on by I was watching those really quite garish Roger Corman movies with Vincent Price, and that really loosely based on Poe's stories. As a kid of maybe between 10 and 12, those were, astonishing to me. Today we look back and think they're quite funny and hammy, but at the time they really kind of struck a chord in me. And then later finding out, obviously Poe has this knock-on effect and then I started reading all the different authors that were inspired by Poe. There's Lovecraft. From Lovecraft and Poe comes Stephen King and H.G. Wells. There's so many people that were big fans of Poe's work, much closer to his timeline. And who knows what he might have become? He died young, pretty well penniless, as many famous authors of the time seem to have done. But it's a big question mark what he, might have he had done if he lived older. He was kind of just getting started, really.
I mean, the thing I found out about, what I like about Poe is how easy, some of, his works are able to be either adapted or used in other stories. Like one of my favorite Ray Bradbury stories from the Martian Chronicles is Fall of the House of Usher 2, about the guy on Mars who rebuilds, has this Poe fixation and does all this stuff. And it's and I remember the old Beetlejuice cartoon where they kind of riff on the Raven and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, even the Simpsons got into it, didn't they?
Yeah.
Their Halloween house horror things. And I forgot about Bradbury's, who's probably my favorite author of all time, was really heavily influenced by Poe. He talks about him a lot, not just in that story, but there's a lot of imagery and he seems take from Poe's work himself and uses it to his own advantage. He always comes up in book burnings, the Poe's being burned, Fahrenheit 451, and there's one I think it's in the Martian Chronicles where they're burning books as well, and Poe comes up in that.
It might be Fahrenheit 451 because that's
they have that, but there's another one where they're destroying books while they're going out to the planets, and I'm trying to remember if that's in Martian Chronicles or if that's another story.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's been a while since I've listened or read the Fall of House of Usher 2, and Poe's what is it about Poe's writing that appeals to you and makes you maybe want to kind of pursue him as the subject of the book?
Well, he's great Gothic author. I mean, it's a bit wordy compared to modern literature, but not as wordy as Lovecraft would get with his Gothic text. But it's all H.P. Lovecraft. It was monsters, cosmic horror, and stuff. But most of Poe's stuff is in people's heads. It's psychological horror. I think it's something that Stephen King went on to use to great effect of what's going on in someone's head. That's the horror. I mean, you mentioned the Pit and Pendulum. No, that's an exterior horror, but Telltale Heart. The ultimate tale of guilt. It's all in someone's head. And
Yeah.
for the time period, it probably was astonishing. I mean, it's a bit like we'll watch a movie by Chaplin or Buster Keaton now, and we'll be a bit, oh, we've seen this all before. But when it came out, these people were trailblazers. Nobody had seen anything like this. And I think Poe's work was probably like that at the time. He was a trendsetter.
So it's it's being collected by Titan Comics. When was it origin? When did you originally publish it, and how did that collaboration with Titan come about?
Oh, I've done several books with Titan previously.
Okay.
I think this is probably my fourth book with them, I think. But I think I kickstarted it last year. I've kickstarted all my books to kind of test them out. And, the numbers I move on a Kickstarter are not going to affect Titan sales, obviously. But it's a nice way to find out little issues with something, and to see if there's an audience out there for this sort of thing. And people seem to really enjoyed this one. It's not. It's a lighter piece. Some of my other stuff is quite dark.
So, not writing and drawing. Tell us a little bit about your process for both writing and then how you work artistically. Do is it traditional? Is it digital? Is it a combination of both?
For the writing style, I'm a great believer in post-it notes. I use post-it notes to great effect, moving things around. And because I'm the artist as well, I don't have to pin down the script as 100% as if I was just handing the script over to a comic writer. I can be fairly loosey-goosey about what I've put down, and then that gives me some freedom at the art stage to kind of expand on some of the ideas. Artistically, I'm completely digital now. Unfortunately, I have a bit of arthritis in my fingers, so working digitally is much easier on the fingers. I use a tablet, so everything's feather-light touch. And so I use vectors for the underdrawing, and I have a big library of real-world paint swatches I've done, which I bring into the artwork with Photoshop and give it all its textures and lighting that way. I mean, I did start in animation the old-fashioned days, the pencil and paper on a light box. But those days are pretty well gone in animation, and I've gone with it in the comics as well.
So, kind of following that thread, working in animation before you kind of got into the comic book side of things. What did that teach you that you were able to use when you were developing the comics?
Well, as animation, you do lots of storyboards, planning for you're telling a story visually, and instead of cuts, you're using panels in comics. So I'm approaching my comics basically as glorified storyboards. And the freeing thing about it for me is I don't have to worry about it being 16 by 9 all the time. Which you do in animation, I can move the landscape however I want to tell the story best. But basically, I think of it more as a film in my head when I'm working on it, rather than images on a paper. At least at the start, I'm thinking about how it cuts and the flow, just as I would with animation.
Was there any learning curve as you were kind of transitioning from one to the other?
Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of I think a lot of it for me was finding a style that worked. Because the style I'm putting on the page is not the same as in animation, because I wouldn't be working with all those textures and things. So all the animation work on is all flat and quite graphic. But there was just sort of learning about the flow of dialogue was a big one for me. In my first book, I wrote all, and then when I reread it, I thought that, gee, the dialogue is just, it's not real world. It doesn't feel like real world. It feels really stilted, and so I went through and had to kind of remap dialogue a lot. But a lot of the process is the same. It's just a lot of long hours, animation or comics. I should have gone into something that was a bit simpler and less time consuming, but I guess I'm just a glutton for punishment.
So you mentioned you did a similar project before the Poe one on Lovecraft. Was there anything that you learned from doing that, and how did from that project that you were able to kind of apply to the Edgar Allan Poe book, and then were there, since they are kind of similar but also different in authors, how was
Yeah.
that?
Well, the Lovecraft book, because I did first, is how it kind of set up the way it was structured. That it starts off basically as a comic, getting into the tale, and then the middle section is all double page spreads with kind of almost Dr. Seuss type rhyming scheme running through it, and then finishing again with the end of the story in comic form. So I'd established that with the Lovecraft one, but I think probably my rhyming has gotten much better. Looking back now at the Cthulhu one with Lovecraft, some of the rhyming's a bit stilted for me now. Now it's not my chosen kind of prose.
Mhm.
But this one, I think I kind of got my bugs out on the Lovecraft book. But I've enjoyed these ones because they're not quite as intensive in that, I haven't got 8 panels on a page. I've got double page spreads with one image to represent a whole story. So I have to worry about all the sequentials of the normal tale telling. So it's a bit freeing, I think. It's part comic book, part storybook, really.
So when you were working on representing the stories, as the full page spreads, were there any of the Poe stories that were more challenging to kind of convey that way than others?
Well, we mentioned the Telltale Heart, and that one was the one that I kept doing again and again with different ideas and stuff because it's all in someone's head. It's very kind of an abstract idea in a way, unless I really want to physically just show him, cutting someone up and stashing them under a floorboard, which isn't the prettiest way of depicting the story. I'm trying to capture the torment and with one single image. That was the one that was probably toughest for me. Some of the others just kind of flow, like Mask of the Red Death or something. Kind of an image springs to mind almost immediately. But I really had to work on the Telltale Heart one for sure.
So, given that you've and not that you're going to be pigeonholing yourself, as this kind of thing, but are having done an H.P. Lovecraft and a Poe, is there any other authors that you would like to kind of give similar treatment to?
I'm considering he's not quite a horror writer, but he's sort of he was another admirer of Poe is Jules Verne. Someone that you need someone looking for someone. Trilogies are always nice little stacks to have, and so I need someone from the same time period who's quite prolific as well. So you have enough stories to deal with. I mean, you have people like Conan Doyle, but they're all Sherlock Holmes. Most of them are Sherlock Holmes stories, so they're all in a way similar. So I think that's the one I'd like to do, but I'm just brushing up by starting to read some of his material, which I haven't read since I was a kid. And what has also come to light, obviously, is that what I read as a kid must have been abridged versions, because that made them easier for kids to read, because some of them, there's quite a bit, like Verne was he liked his research, and he liked to show that he did his research.
Mm-hmm.
So there are entire story, like there's the one about them traveling to the moon, and so much of it is physics and engineering. There's pages and pages and pages of this. As I do not recall reading this as a kid. I'm sure I would have gone through it as a kid. So there must have been different versions that were more kid-friendly that came out for the market.
Now, when you're doing these projects such as the Edgar Allan Poe, I assume there's obviously a lot of research that goes into it, a lot of reading the different stories and kind of breaking them down. Was there anything, while you were doing the book that you didn't know about Poe or his stories that you found to be interesting?
Well, it's reading these back as an adult instead of a kid. I mean, there's a story called The Gold Bug, and there's just a really horrifying depiction of African Americans, and it is just shocking. But I guess it was of the time. But it kind of goes over your head as a kid. I think, especially as a kid in the '70s, so a very different time as well. That was surprising. And then also, I don't know if I should laugh at this, but when Edgar Allan Poe died, he'd been picked up on the street. I believe it was Baltimore, I think. Kind of wandering around, raving like a lunatic with a fever and things. And the weird thing is he's described as wearing someone else's clothes. So to me, that's the greatest Poe mystery of all. Whose clothes was he wearing?
Yeah. So is there anything maybe that we didn't talk about about the book that you wanted to make sure that people knew about?
Wow. I think we've covered most things. It's just a good, fun romp through Poe and his stories. And it just seems to resonate with people who know Poe or even don't know Poe. Each person gets a different thing out of it depending on their experience with them.
Now, were there any Poe stories that you maybe wanted to include but couldn't find a way to translate that onto the page, or you just had to omit because due to restrictions of the space, page count and all that?
It's the same way I dealt with Lovecraft. I chose the ones that were most interesting or classic to illustrate. There are still Poe stories I didn't do, and I mean, obviously he's got a load of poetry beyond the Raven. The Raven is the only piece of poetry I touch in the book. But I mean, there were what a lot of people probably don't know about Poe is that he sort of invented the whole modern detective genre. The Sherlock Holmes, the Agatha Christie characters, with Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is the kind of the original murders in a locked room story.
What's Nate?
He has several stories using that same character, and as such, I only did Murders in the Rue Morgue, but there are a couple more detective stories. I'm trying to remember my mind's gone blank. Is it Inspector Dupin or something?
Yeah.
So I left those out because in a way there's similarities between them as they're detective stories, and probably not as interesting to illustrate it for a morbid person such as myself.
Well, would you like to give a final pitch for the book, and where people can find more from you, or if you're brave enough to delve into the horror show that is social media?
Oh boy, yes. Well, social media has changed so much. My first book, I kind of got off the ground with Twitter, and now I'm not even on Twitter now, and it's a completely changed landscape. But you can find me on social media.
Way past Lovecraft.
Sorry?
Way past Lovecraft.
Oh yeah, it's much deeper and darker than that now, much social media. But you can find me on social media under Norm Konyu on either Instagram or Blue Sky at the moment. I have a website, mooseboy.co.uk, which was sort of my way to keep my head above the waters in the freelance animation world by having people couldn't remember my name. They remember, oh, that Moose Boy guy, and they could find my website and then contact me for work. So the book is out in, just going to flash the cover again there, backwards, is out just before Halloween. So I think second week of October, I believe. It'll be out just in time for Halloween, so perfect timing probably for a book.
Yeah, I was going to say, nice synergy you have going there. Well, has been a pleasure chatting with you about Poe and the book, and if you ever do get around to doing the other book, and would love to have you back and chat about some whatever you're working on. So
okay, great. Yeah, I've got a lot of reading to do, obviously, on the Vern front.
All right. Well, again, thank you for taking the time, and everybody should check out the book, which comes out in October from Titan Comics.